Hello Year 6 families, I thought I'd do a video today to just give you some information about our Year 6 SATs that are coming up in May. So what are SATs? So SATs are standardised assessment tests and they are given to your child at the end of Key Stage 2. The Year 6 children were very surprised to find out that actually it's testing their knowledge throughout their journey at school and not just in Year 6. So that's something to be aware of, that it will test almost all of their knowledge that they've collectively learnt throughout their time with us at Park Lane. So the test will take place over 4 days. This year they will be from Tuesday the 9th of May till Friday the 12th of May. The slight change this year due to us having a bank holiday on the Monday the 8th of May for the King's coronation. So everybody across the country does the same papers on the same day to ensure there is no foul play throughout the process. So Tuesday the 9th of May will be the spelling, punctuation and grammar papers, so there'll be 2 on that day. Wednesday the 10th of May will be the reading paper for all children. Thursday the 11th will be maths paper 1, which is arithmetic, and then maths paper 2, reasoning. And then Friday will be maths paper 3. So writing doesn't actually get assessed as a whole through a paper itself. However, it gets moderated at the end of Key Stage 2, so they'll probably come and visit us during June, and they will look at your children's work in their books for that. However, spelling obviously gets combined within the SPAG paper that they do. So 100% attendance and punctuality is crucial. So we have stressed this throughout the year in terms of like the ATL and the letters that we send home, encouraging your children to be at school as much as they possibly can. But definitely throughout SATs week, 100% attendance is really, really important. If they miss one of the days, when they return the following day, so for example, if they miss the Tuesday, when they come in on the Wednesday, they will have to do the Tuesday's paper and the Wednesday's paper. And obviously that comes with added anxiety and pressure for the children. So we aim to avoid that where possible. So when and how are the SATs completed? So the test will be taking place during school hours under exam conditions. So the children are not allowed to talk as soon as they enter the room. They will be very familiar with this process. They will be completed in small groups as well, so that they come in, they will stay with that set group throughout the day and continue doing some revision in preparation for the next paper. So each test will last no longer than 60 minutes. So you can see the timings up here for each individual paper, so they do vary. And then the tests get sent off and they get marked, and we don't find the results out until July. As mentioned previously, the papers are sent off to be marked externally. So once they are marked, your child will receive a raw score, which is the total number of marks per for the paper. They will receive a scaled score, and then they receive a judgment of whether the national standard has been met. So the scaled scores come from the range from 80 to 120. So a scaled score of 100 would mean that your child has met the standard. And these will then be reported to you at the end of the year to inform you of how your child has got on. The actual grade boundaries for each paper change every year, so it's very difficult to know almost what we are aiming towards. We usually almost go on the basis of last year's papers for each paper, which the children should be aware of the grade markings, but they do get decided nationally depending on how the children do. So if the children do very well nationally across the UK, then obviously the standards of the marks required might increase, for example. So I'm going to talk you through each paper. So on the 9th of May, we have the spelling, punctuation and grammar paper. So this focuses on 3 elements: the spelling, the punctuation and the grammar. The paper 1 lasts 45 minutes, and that has a range of different questions which I'm going to go through in more detail with you. And paper 2 consists of just spelling, and we have around 15 minutes to complete that paper, but it isn't actually a set time. It's as much time as the children need to complete it. So paper 1 focuses on grammatical terms and word classes, functions and sentences, combining words, phrases and clauses, and the rest of the list up here. So the main ones that we will be focusing on are almost word classes and punctuation, because as I discuss later, they get the majority of the marks through there. Some questions require the children to write an answer, some are tick boxes, but any that are written, we usually encourage our children to think about their spelling because it is a spelling paper to ensure they get the marks. So some examples of some paper 1 questions. So for example, they need to identify, in this instance, to tick the sentence that requires a question mark. And actually sometimes it will almost try and trick the children because this idea of almost saying, I wonder what time the next train arrives, almost sometimes makes them think that it's a question when it actually isn't. Again here, we've got to think about the changes in the sentence between when the comma has been added. So they would need to articulate and explain what they think has changed within that. So paper 2 is a shorter test. And that has a spelling script that will be read by one of the Year 6 team. And all the children do is they have the paper like this and they fill in the gap with the required spelling. And now we do encourage the children to check and check again, making sure that they've crossed their T's, dotted their I's, because the slightest little thing, if somebody can't read their handwriting, will unfortunately mean that they don't get the mark for that. So here is almost a breakdown of the 2022 paper and the amount of marks for each question. So as you can see, grammatical terms and word classes were one of the highest ones, including punctuation with 30% of the questions being based around that. So actually those are the main areas that we've been focusing on in school to ensure that they can always consolidate their understanding about that. And then they have the odd few questions about other things such as standard English, formal vocabulary, that sort of thing. But definitely, if there's anything to revise, it would be word classes and then punctuation. 10th of May, we then move on to the reading paper. So the reading paper, they would have 2 booklets. They would have one which has information in and one which has some questions. They would have 60 minutes to complete this paper, and the ideal being that there are 3 texts within this booklet. They get progressively harder as they go through. Paper 1 is usually the easiest, paper 3 being the hardest. And there will be a range of almost non-fiction and fiction text within there. There could also be some poems as well included. And they test on the range of different domains for reading. So example questions, for example, they would have like a little piece of text and they would have to answer the question by writing out a clear answer explaining when the post has arrived in this instance. So we would encourage the children to read the text, answer the question. And then keep moving on. Usually they go through the text in a sequential order, so it's very easy to almost see where the next bit might fall within the paper. And again, sometimes, like for this instance, it roughly is similar answers, but they would want something referring to him eating or having breakfast, but any of those sorts of answers would have been accepted. Again here, we've got one where it's asking about what way is buzz pollination more useful than other forms of pollination, so they've got to identify a reason there, and it gives 2 different options that they could have to get awarded the mark. Sometimes there are then also 3-mark questions, so these tend to be the questions that the children avoid because they see that it's a little bit more writing. Actually, what we've tried to drill into them is even if they have a go and do the impression or just the evidence, they can easily get just 2 marks from just having a go. But in this instance, they will want them to make an impression about what they think Piper's house is like and then why they think that using the evidence. So literally, the evidence would be copied directly from the text, which we encourage them to use highlighters to do that. So for the reading SATs paper, you can see here there are some percentages of the different types of domains that are covered. And again, I've got the 2022 papers that we can have a look at across all the papers, but you can see it's very, very heavily linked with retrieval and inference. So in this instance, there was 44% of questions were related to inference. So this just means that it doesn't directly give you the answer, but you need to use what is said in the text to get the answer. So for example, if it was suggesting about how somebody was feeling, you might need to almost consider what it is telling us in that text to be able to identify how they're feeling. And then retrieval would be using their highlighter directly to get that answer. So then we move on to maths. So these papers take place on the 11th and the 12th of May. So as I discussed earlier, we have 3 papers across the 2 days. 2 of them are completed on the one day. and then the final one would then be completed on the Friday. So some examples of questions for the arithmetic paper. So this will test the 4 operations and look at things like percentages of amounts and calculating decimals and fractions. So there is a total of 40 marks available for this paper. And again here you can see it is saying that they need to show their method. So throughout the paper it is encouraged that they show their method where it is asking that, because even if they then got the incorrect answer, they could still be awarded the mark if it is clear that they were almost on the correct journey to be able to get that answer. So you can see here it would have awarded the 1 mark for the formal method of long multiplication with no more than 1 arithmetic error, so they could still get 1 mark even if the answer was incorrect, and they would write their answer in the box provided. And again here, some examples of some questions. We've got some missing number problems, we've got some involving BODMAS where they have to think about the order that they would calculate their question, and again some percentage ones as discussed. So for paper 2 and paper 3 for maths, it focuses on reasoning, so each of the papers have a total of 35 marks available each. And so you can see some examples of some areas that it covers for maths, but this is almost a broader perspective within maths, not just focusing on arithmetic at this point. And so for example here we've got a measuring question, and we've also got a sequencing question. Again here they would have to look at the jug and figure out how much paint is in the container, and they would fill in the box accordingly. Here they would look at the sequence and obviously figure out what the next number is going to be and the one previous. Here they have got to figure out which numbers are the prime numbers and then explain how they know the other numbers are not prime. So this is checking their understanding of how they can articulate, how they can easily distinguish between prime numbers and not prime numbers. And again, they would be awarded the mark for explaining that correctly. So here are 2 further examples of some maths questions. So we've got here a statistics question where they're looking at the pictogram, so they're using the key in order to be able to answer the question here. And here we've got almost a conversion one where they'd have to use their understanding about kilometres and miles to be able to convert it to get the answer. Here is an example of a 3-mark question. So this almost has multi-steps, and again they're encouraged to show their method in the box because they can be awarded the mark even if they get the answer incorrectly. Again, they would then focus by putting it in the box at the end. So as you can see from looking at the coverage across the papers here, the percentages for each question, you can see it's very heavily based around calculations and fractions, decimals and percentages. So these would be the 2 areas that we would suggest if you think your children are unsure or you want to do a bit more practice at home, focus on those 2 as the core elements. As you can see, some of the areas, such as statistics, only have like 3% of the marks available. So yes, we will have covered that by the end of year 6 in preparation for the SATs, but almost main focuses would be to ensure that their understanding of those key areas would be heavily consolidated. So, advice for year 6 children ahead of SATs. Ensure that you are listening to your teacher. We are very experienced in year 6. We have been through this process before, so we are trying to help you as much as possible and get you ready in preparation for that week in May. And we all want you to do your best. Make sure that you get plenty of sleep and eat well, because this will help your brain.